I was looking into the mirror. My mom's presence immediately came through. These experiences that I hadn't thought about literally since I was a child just started to flash in my vision. It was her stature, it was her face, her head, her hair, her body. Tears started just streaming down my face. And I was like, whoa. It was truly like a trance-like state, unlike anything I've ever had. And I actually have never told this story to anyone until today. So thank you for asking this.
I recently launched Love Covered Life Academy, where I offer monthly masterclasses at a deeply discounted rate. These courses include profound meditations that will guide you into a deep spiritual connection, monthly teaching videos, and daily practices that we get to do together in community. All this you'll get to experience with a growing community group of conscious, spiritually minded individuals, and monthly live Q&A sessions with me where I deep dive into your spiritual practice with you and answer your questions. Sign up here. I cannot wait to see you there. I am here today with Neal Bakshi, who is the founder and CEO of Awaken Mind Sciences. He's had several profound spiritual experiences throughout his life, which we're going to talk about today. He's also a consciousness researcher, best-selling author, and international retreat creator who focuses on uncovering the true nature of consciousness through firsthand felt experiences, which is something so many of us need today. So, Neal, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on, Melissa. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Likewise. So, let's start with a little bit of background from you. How did your spiritual journey begin?
Yeah, so I'm actually very grateful that I was raised in a spiritual family. So since the age of 5, I started learning how to meditate. I was raised on the spiritual path called Self-Realization Fellowship, which was founded by an Indian guru who came to the United States in 1920 named Paramahansa Yogananda to teach meditation. And so my life progressed on that path since I was a young child, and ultimately I veered off a little bit as I got older. I wanted to make a lot of money, and I ultimately became an investment banker. I worked at Goldman Sachs and spent 8 years on Wall Street in total. And my mom very suddenly and unexpectedly passed on in 2020 after a routine 30-minute outpatient thumb surgery. And it was a complete shock, completely unexpected. And so that was my real catalyst that pushed me back into my meditative upbringing and spiritual roots. And in the months that followed, I basically opened as a channel to receive guidance from outside of myself. And I communicate with what I now know to be angels, or the higher self of myself and others. And then the ability of mediumship came through shortly thereafter, as well as I had a desire to communicate with my mom. So that's been, in a nutshell, a little bit of the journey and path. It's been quite interesting, but new different gifts continue to open and expand. And yeah, it's been a beautiful journey.
Wow. I'm so sorry for the loss of your mom. My heart goes out to you in that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was the catalyst that I wouldn't have otherwise really awoken to this other side of the duality of life. So I was very in the material world as a banker, and now I'm very in the spiritual world, and I'm understanding how to balance the two and be able to live in a harmonic, peaceful balance as being a spiritual being that is living a human existence. So it's been a journey, is the way I can best
Mhm.
describe it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to hear your perspective on why is it that these difficult things that we go through open us up spiritually?
It's so interesting that you asked me this question, because I've been thinking about this so much over the course of the last few weeks. I've been asking myself the question, is it really necessary for us to go through extreme, intense, difficult experiences, the loss of a job or a breakup or a family member or a loved one? And I think what it does is it takes us out of our routine day to day. We are such habitual creatures that the majority of our days are actually run basically on autopilot. We're not really making conscious decisions. And what happens when a big cataclysmic event happens in our life is it takes us out of our normal day-to-day routine, our normal comfort zone, our normal just way of perceiving things, and asks us to go deeper into the questions that really matter at the heart of our soul. And I think that these experiences are ultimately necessary in a sense in order to jolt us on a path in a very sudden way. I don't think it's always needed. I think people can naturally gravitate towards a path, but that may happen either at a slower pace or not as direct pace, or maybe even as a very direct pace. But I think sometimes the majority of us need this massive event to take place in order for us to be like, okay, there's something here I'm meant to pay attention to that's not outside of myself, but rather inside of myself.
That makes a lot of sense because when you go through tragic circumstances, I think there's more of a tendency to go within to look for answers. We were talking about before the show about how a lot of people are having an intense time right now. And one of the things that I've experienced is the loss of my cat, who was an emotional support animal for me. And it's very interesting how, I've always wanted the spiritual connection and I've always sought the spiritual connection, but something about losing him made that more available to me and I'm not sure exactly what it was, but I did have like, I was really seeking for answers, really seeking for that connection.
My condolences on
Mm,
the loss of
thank
I
you.
won't call it a loss, I'll say crossing over. That's usually how I refer to it,
Yes.
as the crossing over of your beautiful fur baby. And what I think this does, grief does, loss does, is it opens up our heart because it allows us to open the heart barriers in a totally different way, for us to show our vulnerability, for us to go into grief in a way that allows the most human parts of us to be shown and go into that
Mm.
vulnerability, which then creates the springboard and the catapult basically for us to unfurl our inner freedom in a way. And I think that lets the heart sing in a way that really feels resonant with the soul and how it wants to express love for what was lost.
I love that. Yeah, and that rings true for me. Something about just being with the grief, being with those emotions that we tend to suppress and not want to feel. But when something like that happens, you can't really get away from it.
Absolutely. And as we talked about, I think this right now is happening on a very collective level. A lot of people are going through immense transformation, be it through loss or change in relationships or complete change in direction in career or complete reevaluation to their relationship with old patterns or old behaviors, maybe around money or self-worth or limiting beliefs. It's something that this eclipse portal that we're in is
Mhm.
really amplifying right now. And I think it's ultimately transient, like everything else here on this physical plane. We'll ultimately move through it. That will take us to the next paradigm. So knowing that this moment too shall pass will allow us to get there. But it does involve feeling all the feelings, understanding fully what's happening, getting to that point of complete acceptance in order for us to be able to treat it with gratitude so that we can consciously move on to bring in what we do want to bring in.
Mm, I love that. So, going back to your story, when your mother crossed over, you began to have access to these different spiritual gifts or connections in your life. So, what was the first thing that you experienced?
So I'll give you a little bit of a timeline just so it's easier to
Okay.
follow this. So she crossed over in mid-July 2020. And so for the first 6 months, it really was picking up the pieces for my family and myself. And I went really deep into meditation to seek peace and solace more than anything. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would be sobbing in my pillow, completely covered in tears, like didn't even know that was possible. Very crazy stuff. And then in the first 3 months of 2021, in my morning meditations every single day for 90 straight days, I received a message that said, "You need to help people. You need to help people. You need to help people." That's all it said. And I had no idea what that meant, what I was supposed to do. Mind you, I was just a banker and I was like, okay, like this is my life. Like I live in New York and I wear pinstripe suits and get into fancy SUVs and go to board meetings with CEOs. Helping people was I did that growing up as like volunteer work and I was an Eagle Scout, but this was like a very different pull. And so I started to notice numbers actually over the course of that year. And it wasn't your typical, like, okay, I saw 11:11 on the clock and that's great. It was because I was a banker and had Excel open and my Bloomberg screen and CNBC in the background every day. I was noticing these repeating numbers, primarily repeating numbers 20, 30, 40 times a day. And I was like, as a very analytical person, I was like, this is really weird. Like, this isn't normal. And I would start to do a little bit of research and Googling, and I was like, why, like, what does these numbers mean? And so then I got into numerology, understanding that Pythagoras is the father of numerology, the ancient Greek philosopher from the 6th century BCE. And he claims that every number in the universe carries an innate vibration. And when put into specific sequences or patterns, they carry messages and people call them angel numbers. So I was like, oh, okay. I'm being communicated to by angels. This is kind of cool. And that evolved over the course of 2021 to be I started to get specific written signs written out for me. So I would pass by billboards in New York or storefronts, or there was writing on chalk on the ground, basically answering a question or feeling that I had. And I was like, okay, like, is someone watching me? Like, how is this happening? And then I started to ask for specific signs. And I was like, okay, if I'm really being communicated to by angels here, give me the specific sign. And there's one instance I really remember where I was leaving in the middle of the day in the summer and I was like, okay, show me a man of East Asian descent wearing a blue hat and a black jacket standing on the subway platform right next to me. And I left my apartment and I was like, okay, like, we'll see if this really happens. And so I went to the subway, and sure enough, out of 10 people on the platform, that exact archetype was standing next to me. And I was like, okay, this is wild. Like, something is happening here. And from that moment on, it's always a dance between like, am I really going crazy or am I really seeing this? It's like this ego self versus how do I lean into deeper faith and self trust? And then I was like, okay, if I'm really talking to angels, let's see if I can have a conversation. And so in meditation, I would go in and I would basically attempt to have conversations. And at first, it started with like one word little answers. And then it got to like maybe 3 words, 5 words. And then it was a sentence. And then soon enough, over the course of a month, I was able to have a dialogue with angels ultimately, but I now know it to be my higher self. And then after that became sort of well versed in me, I had this desire to still connect with my mom. I missed her so much. And I was like, can I communicate with my mom on the other side? So I basically tried doing the same thing that I do in this meditative state, but with the intention to connect with my mom. And that immediately came through once this channel was open and it was full felt sense, feeling her hug me, hearing her voice, her presence was there. It was and I would start crying in meditation. I was like, wow, this is like really profound. Like, there's something that's happening. And so I just did this for myself for a year and eventually met people who I was like, okay, maybe I can open up and tell them about these little angel experiences and mediumship experiences I had. And then they were like, I was at a breathwork retreat in Ibiza, and they were like, okay, can you do it for us? And I was like, I've never done this for anyone else, so don't expect anything, but sure. And so I gave 5 of them mini angel readings, and the, the responses were like people started sobbing. People were like, that was exactly what I needed to hear. One person was like, how did you even know that about me? Someone was like, you were channeling something. And I was like, I don't know, like, I just did for you what I do for me, and sure enough, over the course of a year after that, I've done well over 350, 400 of these readings for people, and the gift continues to get ever more strong, and so it's been a fascinating journey for this communication and gift of angel mediumship.
Wow, that is incredible. So it started out with you seeing the angel numbers, which is really interesting, and I'd love to dive into that a little more if you're okay with it.
Of
What were
course.
the numbers that you were seeing?
It was truly every repeating number. So it would be 111, 222, 333, 444, 555, and then there were the ascending and descending numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 654, 321, 234. And it would be like really weird. And I started to just like feel these patterns and I was like, what is happening? Like, there needs to be something that's like I've never noticed this in my life. So something is happening here.
Okay, that's crazy. So I'm curious because each number is supposed to have its own specific meaning, right? So what would it mean if you were getting strings of all of the numbers?
So when they're put into specific sequences, it means they're even more amplified or it's even more powerful. And so numerology is it goes so deep. There's master numbers 11, 22, 33 are these numbers that don't get reduced, for example.
Mhm.
And so just starting with the basics, because then we'll add up to what it means amplified. A great way that I've learned how to understand the concept of what each number vibration means is through an amazing psychic numerologist friend of mine named Dale. He goes, one is the man, two is the woman, three is the child that comes forth. Four is the four walls of the house that they build together. Five is when they look over the mountains and see what's beyond and are excited about this expansion and growth. And they go over the mountain to experience that. Six is coming back to home and family and love and community and grounding. Seven is after they've had this experience, they now start asking themselves the deeper questions. What is life? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Seeking answers, deep spiritual truths, insight, and philosophy. Eight is a number of power, ambition, structure, bringing into creation, strength. Nine is the number of a full completion of a cycle, ending of cycles, 360 degrees of a circle, for example, add up to nine, which is this full completion and ending. And then zero, although it's not a number, carries with it the vibration of the universal God energy, which amplifies everything for a higher universal love. And so these numbers, so like one, for example, let's say new beginnings. One is someone who is basically trying to is the master intuit. So it's someone who is very intuitively tapped in. 111 is a number of sacred creation. 1111 is a number of manifestation. So as you see, it's the same aspect of new beginnings, but when it becomes in a row or more amplified, it carries with it a stronger meaning or basically like a crescendo, like really pushing you in this direction.
That's fascinating. It's interesting that you went through the 111 because that's the one that I keep seeing in my life over the last 3 months, just everywhere, literally everywhere. I'll look at my YouTube stats and it'll be 91111. I'll look at the clock and it's like either 1111 or it's 711, 411, 311. It's just everywhere.
So what I receive from that is you're at this phase of a completely new beginning, so to speak. And
Mhm.
the energy is very heightened with these with specifically 11 or 1111. That's why people often say, "Oh, look, it's 1111, make a wish." Because when 1111, that's a number of manifestation. So your angels or guides, they really want you to focus on what are you thinking in that exact moment as you see that number because your thoughts also have a correlation of what you're thinking when you see it. But they also want you to think about, okay, what is it in your life that you really want to bring into being in your life? And when you see that number, it's their nudge as a reminder to say, okay, this number's here, but it's actually a sign for you to bring your thought consciousness back into what you want to bring into creation because you right now are very attuned and tapped into the heart of creation and manifestation as a creative being. So what is it that you want to manifest into your life right now? So it's a little bit of a nudge and reminder to come back into that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Maybe let's go through one more number. Another common one that people see is 222.
222. So I see this one a lot too. It's two is a number of duality. It's a number of the feminine. It's a number of creation as well. And what I get with 222 is a number of reassurance. It's a number that I'm in the right place at the right time. And so actually every time I see that number, I will say to myself out loud, even if it's a whisper, I'll say, "Thank you, angels, for reminding me of your presence. I am in the right place at the right time right now. I'm exactly where I need to be." And it's an affirmation because sometimes those aspects of, okay, am I really on the right path here? Am I doing the right things? Is this really where I'm supposed to be? Often comes into the human mind. And that number is really an affirmation saying, yes, you're exactly where you need to be right now. So it lets you ease in and relax into just yourself and your beingness. And so yeah, that's a great number.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Of course.
So I love to get back to your story. So you've had several profound experiences. One of them was at a darkness retreat. Would you like to share about that?
I would love to share about that. So December 2023, I went into complete darkness for 132 hours. It was 6 nights, 7 days. And I actually first found out about this darkness retreat in May of that year. But I applied and they said, we're completely booked. The next opening we potentially have is 2024. We'll put you on a wait list. And in late October, they messaged me and said, hey, we have this opening for a little over a month from now if you'd like to come. And I was like, I have to do this. I felt this deep calling to experience this. And I went in and I went in with the intention to completely let go. And darkness and going into darkness is actually a very ancient practice. It's practiced amongst multiple just ancient cultures from the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Mayans, the Buddha was known to go into a cave and meditate. The Prophet Muhammad was believed to receive the first verse of the Quran in a cave. The Kogi tribe in Colombia in the Sierra Nevada mountains actually still to this day, they take their highest form of healers known as mamos and they take them at a very young age and they basically spend the first nearly 9 years of their life in a cave. And the whole point is it's almost very similar to a quote by St. Francis of Assisi that you're really able to, and I'll just paraphrase it, but it's you're able to really see your true self when you're in that darkness. For example, the way I perceived it was, and I experienced it personally, was that we are light, but light doesn't even begin to explain what it actually is, because light is simply a concept of words. And what we actually are is far beyond what the human intellect can understand or words can possibly convey as a medium for that. And the closest thing we can get to is light. And so, well, what is the opposite of light? It's darkness. And so you need that juxtaposition and duality for the light to actually see itself. For example, fire can't burn itself and a knife can't cut itself, and water doesn't know itself to be wet. However, if you take that water out in a bucket and you pour it on dry land, okay, well, now you have a concept of the duality of the wet water and the dry land. And so similarly, it's like going to two hydrogen molecules and an oxygen molecule and saying, you're wet. It just is a completely different language. It doesn't compute. They won't understand what you're saying. And so that my experience was really seeing myself as what I am, that is far deeper than a flesh body. It's truly, it transcends what words can even explain. And it's really when you're put into that situation where it's just you and your thoughts. And I was meditating hours and hours and hours a day with no concept of time. That's really what came out of it, just like deep, profound channeling.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing about that experience. So I imagine when you're meditating to that degree, it's you can really get past the mind chatter and really get deep into meditation in a way that is really difficult in everyday life.
Yes and no, because the ego actually wants to come up quite strongly and it wants to make itself feel seen and heard because you can't see or hear anything in that. You're just feeling your
Mm.
way around the room to use the bathroom, to use the
Oh,
shower.
yeah.
Like there's nothing there. And oftentimes what came up was each day had a different theme for me. So one day my mom came through really profoundly and it was a very like healing experience that I had with her as it pertains to feeling like I need to live up to an expectation and I can't be a failure and these kinds of things. Then another day was a complete experience with going deep into my previous romantic relationships and healing deep aspects within me that were ultimately our relationships are a mirror. And so those were how can I go within myself to actually face what's in me? that came up in these former partnerships. Another day was basically like deep ambition for what's to come in business endeavors and how I want to express myself creatively going forward. And then as we got closer to the end of it, what starts to happen as you spend longer times in darkness is your brain starts to release NN dimethyltryptamine or DMT. And it's the same psychoactive compound that is released when you go into an ayahuasca ceremony, for example. However, this is endogenous DMT. So your body is releasing this DMT from within. And so on the physiological level, what's happening is as we led up into that, my vision would start like flashing lights because it's basically my retina or eyes trying to bounce off of the nearest object so that it can reflect what it's seeing to create a vision in my mind. But there's nothing there to respond. So it's almost like it felt like my eye is sending out a signal, trying to see, okay, what am I going to get bounced back? But nothing's there. So it's just these lights flashing. And then further on, I was having full blown experiences of being transported to a completely different place. So I was in this like ancient ruin area, and I really felt the voice of it was, I'll say, God speaking that I've never really heard in that way. And I channel a fair amount every day. And so this was like a strong voice that I was like, whoa, okay, and like this energy was showing me around, and it even gave me like what is to come in this year. And it was like there's going to be mass destruction, sacred sites are going to be destroyed, you're going to see ruins, there's going to be a lot of death. And like sure enough, that we have many wars, especially in very ancient places like Palestine, which is believed to be where people like Jesus, Mary Magdalene, all of these people preached, right? So these ancient sacred sites, everything is just very different. And then different experiences where I was like transported into a cave in the Himalayas, and my eyes were completely open and I was looking around the room, and it was vivid. It was completely vivid. And in that cave, my mom was speaking to me, and it was just like it really felt like on a completely different level of experience. Yeah, of
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that. Could you
course.
share more about the visions that you had?
For sure. So the the this main one that I received was so there were two that I primarily received. The one with my mom, I was transported into a cave in the Himalayas. It was a cave known as Babaji's cave. And so Mahavatar Babaji is a very say go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, if I could go anywhere in the world, it would be there.
There you go. So my mom actually took a pilgrimage there when I was a very young child, and she came back, and it was very profound for her. So one of the visions, I was actually transported into that cave, and it was a full eyes open vision. I was like literally in this cave, and I've never been there before. I've never seen a picture of it. And I was like, oh, and it was like, this is Babaji's cave. He showed up over there. My mom was speaking to me off to my left side, and it was like a very beautiful experience. She was like, I'm blessing you here. She's like, you're actually going to be coming here. Don't worry about when, but when you come here, it will also be a very sacred experience." And I was just like, wow. And then I basically went to write it down. So I wrote over 104 pages. And people are like, well, how did you write in complete darkness? I used my in the indent corner of the page and just wrote till the end of the page and moved my thumb down and then wrote again. And it was actually the neatest handwriting I've ever written in my life. So it's crazy.
Wow.
But this second experience, so after I went back and wrote that down, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna like lie down now. Like that was intense. And this voice spoke to me and it said, no, you're not. You need to go back and sit down and meditate. And I was like, okay, I need to go sit down and meditate. And so I sat down and I dropped in very quickly. And it was literally this voice that I genuinely believe was God's voice saying, this is actually where you're from. And it was these words called the halls of Amenti. And it's again something I don't really know about. And he was like, this is where you're from. But it was like ancient, it was like very like rock structure, bunch of old rocks and ruins and little caves. And it was completely destroyed. And it was just like nothing was really there. And then this voice was like, I'm going to show you what's about to happen. And it basically said, humanity is going through a cycle where they need to remember who they really are and what they really are. And it is part of this wave that is always created in humanity where it goes through waves of destruction and rebirth. And we're going through this period and phase of mass destruction, but it's necessary in order to awaken humanity to what they really are as the core essence of love, as their true being, as their true unity and oneness of what they really are. And it was really intense because I saw this like death and destruction in bodies, and I was like, whoa. And but it was like this needs to happen because this is paving the path for the basically the upswing of the realization for humanity to realize what they really are. So it was intense.
Wow, it sounds intense. So, do you have any advice for people as we go through this process, this destruction process, and how we can get through it as smoothly and as quickly as possible?
Beautiful question. And the words that really come to me as you say that are compassion and love and gratitude. And the way that comes through is because I believe our core purpose here on earth is twofold, and this is my own belief. The meaning of life is ultimately derived by everyone in their own individual experience because that's what they're living. But for me, it's to love and to create. And I believe that as expressions of creation, we are here to learn how to create for the highest good of all. And most importantly, we're actually here to love and understand that we are simply the energy of pure love, and that only love is real, and that anything else that is not rooted in love is part of the egoic illusion of separation that we find ourselves living in this holographic 3D world that is very real to us, much like a dream feels real when we're asleep. And this core aspect of love, even if you think about the chakra energy system, for example, we have three lower chakras, the root, sacral, and solar plexus, and three upper chakras, the throat, third eye, and crown, which are linked through the heart. And so we're here to ultimately open our heart to embody full and complete love. And this aspect of how do we connect and relate to other humans through our shared humanity, understanding that they experience all of the same emotions as we do, whoever anyone else is, and being able to drop divisiveness, be it through sexual orientation or gender or race or religion, to ultimately see we are a shared single populace. We are shared humans. That is one of the biggest ways to go through this, and the way we have that is compassion. Ultimately, how do you open your heart with compassion to understand what people are going through? Everyone is fighting a battle that we don't know about. Everyone is living their own narrative, and being able to hold them with compassion, see them for what's happening. And ultimately, the last aspect of what comes through for me is gratitude. There there are no victims in this life, in this world. We are living in a world that I genuinely believe is self-created. Our soul has created it before we came into this body in this lifetime, that we pass through a veil of forgetting as we come into this world, forgetting who we really are, forgetting our true nature of being love, of being a singular fractal of creation. And if we allow ourselves rather to experience what needs to be experienced fully as the observer of the experience, and then fully allow that to wash over us, allow the emotions to be felt, the thoughts to be thought, but then come into a place of gratitude for that, we can then allow ourselves to move forward. And it's almost what we were talking about in the beginning, that gratitude is what keeps the aperture of the heart space open. And through viewing the life happening through us, for us, instead of happening to us, we completely shift our mindset out of that of one of victim or lesser than or powerlessness to being the ultimate co-creators of our reality with the energy of gratitude, love, and compassion.
I love that so much. And I fully believe, based on my own experiences, that somebody could become enlightened, so to speak, through gratitude alone because it completely transforms your consciousness.
I 100% agree with you. 100% agree with you. And a couple of years ago, I started this practice in my life called gratitude in the now, and it has actually changed my life. It's basically how can I be grateful for everything that happens in the now Because we often realize, be it 3 months, 5 years, or 10 years down the line, "Oh, this couldn't have happened if that didn't happen." We only see that silver lining so far removed. And so I thought to myself, what happens if I allow myself to close the gap of being able to see that silver lining instead of 10 years from now, 10 minutes from now, after I allow myself to fully feel the feelings? Because from a scientific perspective, the neurological sensation of the cocktail of chemicals that are released when we feel emotions lasts 90 seconds. So if we allow ourselves to feel that fully for that 90 seconds or 10 minutes, whatever that is, and then allow ourselves to shift into saying, "Okay, I'm grateful that this happened. I don't know why this happened. I don't need to know why right now, but you know what? I'm really grateful." And I'll give you an example of this. I was on a vacation in Ibiza, and I rented a car, and my friend was driving it, and we were pulling back into the house, and there was a turn, and we pulled in. She was driving, I was actually in the passenger seat. She pulled in and completely just, like, destroyed the side of the car, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is, like, horrible, like, this is, like, this car is, like, thousands of dollars of damage, and I was like, "Okay, there's a lot of ways that this can go right now. I can probably explode, I can get really angry." I was like, "I can spiral into being like, 'Oh my gosh, I'm about to lose so much money.'" I was like, "You know what? What if I just take a step back and say, you know what? I'm actually grateful that this happened. I'm actually really grateful that this happened. I don't know why." And it shifted everything in the moment. She didn't really get like it pulled her out of like no need to feel upset. I was like held my just like very, very present, compassionate, just like it's absolutely okay. Like this is completely okay. Don't worry about it. Like this was actually meant to happen. I'm grateful this happened. And sure enough, you're like, "Okay, like, what did you get out of that?" Well, interestingly, I had my insurance completely covered it, so nothing happened, and actually what happened was I got reimbursed back in euros instead of dollars, and I ended up going to a retreat the following year where I ended up paying with those euros instead of needing to convert dollars and lose currency conversion. So I was like, "Ah, I didn't know why this needed to happen, but clearly this is why it happened, and it worked out for a really good cause in a really good way for me."
Wow, that's amazing. So here's a question. If you hadn't had that grateful reaction and you had become frustrated or upset and gotten down into those more negative emotions, then do you think it still would have worked out in the same way?
I genuinely don't know. It probably may have, but I think the difference that it is that I would have gone through self-created turmoil for a very long period of time before the car was returned, or rather even longer before I got reimbursed months later. So, I think what shifts is your own internal state of being. It allows you to feel more calm, more peaceful, more in flow with the flow of life, knowing that we don't really know everything that's gonna happen. We really don't, and I clearly know that by my mom very suddenly being gone less than 2 days after my birthday, and so that really changed a lot of my perspective to say, "Okay, I really don't know what's gonna happen. How can I allow myself to be along for the ride with a lot of gratitude in my heart regardless of what happens?"
Thank you for sharing that experience. So you've had some other experiences. You've had a samadhi experience during breath work. Would you like to share about that?
I would love to. So, I'll even rewind a little bit further. So, after my mom's passing, for about a year and a half, I was called to sit with the medicine known as ayahuasca. And so I didn't know anything about it. There was just this part of me that was like, I feel like I need to learn about this. So I did a bunch of research, and I went to a retreat in the Peruvian Amazon in late 2021. And part of the retreat, they allowed you to take part in a medicine ceremony using this medicine known as bufo or sapo, where it's the venom from the back of the Sonoran desert toad that is vaporized and inhaled. And the psychoactive compound is 5-MeO DMT. So a little bit different molecular structure than DMT from ayahuasca. and the endogenous DMT that was released in my dark retreat. But this is like, it was a profound experience. I went into this white light. It was like I felt pure, pure love. I felt the energy of basically being given my purpose, saying you need to help and guide people. And so long as you do that, you will be taken care of and provided for. And I came back and like tears were streaming down my face. And I had no concept of how long I was like out in this plane for. It was like 20 minutes, but I came back, you're completely lucid, like clear to drive a car. And so what happened was I went to another retreat in Jordan. It's called A Fest, and it's produced by this company called Mind Valley. And one of the speakers or practitioner workshops was led by this guy named Niraj Naik, and he's the founder of a company called Soma Breath. And he led over 300 people in this auditorium through a 90-minute breathwork experience. And I took it very deeply as I would take basically going into a deep meditation using Kriya Yoga, very like spine straight, really focusing on moving the breath up and down the spine and the body. And I entered this experience where my body was completely motionless. I had no sense of my heartbeat, my breath. It was like complete like body suspension. It was like all animation was suspended. And I was in this like pure bliss, ecstatic state that was exactly similar to what I experienced in that medicine ceremony with Bufo. And I was like, I came out of it afterwards and I was like, I don't know what this is that I just did. And I went up to Niraj and I said, I need to learn what you just did. I experienced something that was on par with the most profound experience I had at that point in my life. And I said, how do I learn what you're doing? And he said, oh, well, we're leading a retreat where I'll teach you how to become a certified instructor, and it'll be in Ibiza. And that's actually where the car incident took place while I was there. So yeah, so it all, like, flows together, but it was an incredible experience, and it shows you how powerful your body is and just your breath to take you into a state that a plant medicine or a psychedelic medicine can take you into.
Amazing. Are there any experiences with your mom that you would be open to sharing? You've done some channeling with her?
Yeah, so I do a lot of channeling, and it's one of the it's one of the most things I think I ever do because it pulls me back into the present. When the mind wants to jump into the future or worry about the past, it really roots you in this here and now, and it gives you guidance more than anything and reassurance. So I've channeled from angels every day to extraterrestrials to seventh dimensional entities that one of them is my guides. Like, you're like, how do you know seventh dimensional? I asked them, I was like, who is communicating with me? And that came through last year. But then my mom, it's the mediumship side is it's beautiful because it shows you really and truly that the end of the physical body is not the end of the existence. It's crossing over because you're crossing over into a different frequency of energy, into a different plane of existence, an astral plane. And one of the most beautiful, profound experiences I had, I was in my apartment in New York, and this was in 2021. And it was around the fall, and I was looking into the mirror, actually, and I was just sort of looking at myself one evening, and my mom's presence immediately came through as I was looking at myself, and I almost felt like I was in a trance, and I started having a full conversation with her in a tranced meditative state in my mind, and flashbacks and visions of things she wanted to show me, times she wanted to show me basically like how much I love you, how much I'm still here because her death was still quite fresh in my heart. And these experiences that I like hadn't thought about literally since I was a child just started to flash in my vision. And then her voice came through and we were having a full conversation. And I was just looking in the mirror and I felt her hug me and it was her full there, like, I could see her. It was her stature, it was her face, her head, her hair, her body, and I just started as I was looking at my own self, and then I just tears started just streaming down my face, and I was like, "Whoa," like, it was I was truly like a trance-like state unlike anything I've ever had, and I actually have never told this story to anyone until today. So thank you for asking this because it really was and still is to this day the most memorable experience of mediumship and communication with my mom that I've ever had. And it interestingly just happened while eye gazing into my own eye, which is it shows you also that you don't necessarily need to go into a meditative state and also a reminder of how much of a reflection everything is. It's like a beautiful saying I heard recently was the universe is you inverse. And so, yeah, it almost is that reflection back.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing such a personal experience. And it's very interesting that it happened as you were gazing into your eye, because I recently heard someone talking about how we're we feel really uncomfortable looking ourselves in the eye, and we don't normally do that.
Yes, and so something I've also learned over the course of my experience is that when you actually either eye gaze into your own eye or speak to someone, let's say someone is across from you. You want to look into the eye on the right. It'll be their left eye, but it'll be the eye you're looking on the right. And that's believed to be the eye of the soul. And they say that that allows you to connect directly into the soul. And so oftentimes when I speak with people, I'll just look directly into that eye. And I found that it actually who knows if it's placebo, right? But if it's I actually find that I am able to go very deep with people, really see people, really hold a deep intentioned conversation that allows me to connect. So yeah, just a fun little eye gazing fact factoid.
Very interesting. That's good to know too. So, I'd like to give you a chance to share where the viewers can find you and anything you have going on that you'd like them to know about.
Of course. This conversation flew by. So thank you for having me on. I did
Yes.
not even realize how long we have been talking for.
I know, it seems like it's been a lot less than an hour.
I know. Thank you so much for asking very insightful and thoughtful questions. So the best way for people to find me is my website, nealbakshi.com, or Instagram is also great. I respond to everyone DM at neal.bakshi. And as you mentioned in the beginning of the show, my passion is traveling the world. And I've been to 50 countries across all 7 continents. And what I've come to realize through that is again, we all share the human experience and the healing that I've been able to personally realize as I travel around the world has been deeply profound in the years since my mom's crossing. And what I have felt called to do since is actually bring people with me around the world to experience that. So I now create these adventure, travel, healing experiences in ancient places, so Egypt or Mayan ruins of Mexico. And I actually just recently came back from Mexico creating truly an unforgettable experience that I'm so excited about. That is a 8-day healing travel journey through the Yucatan Peninsula. And that is honestly where people can find me in real life and ultimately come to experience a deep, transformative, life-changing, genuinely experience alongside me. So if people are interested in that, I would love to have them along for the ride, and it's gonna be something that is gonna be fun. We're gonna be going to ruins in Chichen Itza, snorkeling with turtles, catamaran rides, meditation, cacao ceremony, temazcal ceremonies, water therapy. Like it's a whole healing experience mixed with adventure, travel, and connection.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So, do you have any final message that you'd like to share before we go?
So I would actually love to pull an angel card for for the viewers and for your audience.
Yeah, I would love that.
Amazing. So I have these right next to me. So very simply, thank you, angels, for revealing to me what I need to know and what all of the audience of Love Covered Life need to know for their highest good and wisdom and the highest good of all. So we say, and so it is, Taisha Intadoe, Taisha Intadoe, Taisha Intadoe, spoken as it is stated, and so it is done. Thank you. Beautiful. So the message that the angels want to come through is they want to share a message that is the pure energy of what we are here to ultimately do, and that is to live in joy, to share your joy. So if you're watching this right now, if you are looking for ways that you can deepen your own connection, understanding guidance in your life, there's probably a lot of different opportunities and options laid out in front of you. What the angels and the higher self abroad want us to know is lean into the option that gives you the most joy. Lean into what lights you up more than anything else. Because when you do that, that is when the sequential doors will start to open even wider, and you'll be able to walk in through the doors as if they are opening right before you, to feel like that element of flow is guiding you. There's no need for this resistance. And oftentimes what holds us back are fearful thoughts, as saying, okay, but I need to make money. So that means I need to do this. And then I need to go after this job and I have to work here to provide for my kids. But your angels actually want you to know that your purpose here is to live in joy, to extend that joy and forgiveness to everyone. And most importantly, to yourself. And so whatever it is that actually makes your heart sing, take a moment in the morning to say, okay, what will bring me a lot of joy today? And do that one thing, no matter if it's eating a bowl of cereal or reaching out and texting a friend or playing a musical instrument or even just taking a nap. Lean into the aspects that make you feel most joyful.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me on, Mosa.
Of course.
Thank you for watching and listening. Your views, likes, comments, and shares truly make the biggest difference in supporting this channel. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links to today's guest, as well as my links. You'll find me on social media at Love Covered Life, my website, lovecoveredlife.com, and the Be a Guest link for anybody who would like to be a guest on the channel. I have great news. Love Covered Life podcast is coming available on audio podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to your audio podcasts.